Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're going to get started here. We are expecting more people, but they can trickle in as they are able to. So my name is Kelly. I'm working with the Tree Fruit and Wine Grape Industry Associations on a new cross-commodity leadership support project. And the main thing that project does is provide extra staff to work on challenges that growers are facing and help identify solutions. There's really true power in collaboration, and what we're able to do is work with people like Tyrion and Melissa and Beth Cavers and Kate and others on just addressing these really difficult challenges that we're facing. For example, this session today, was an idea of the industry associations, and we were able to jump in, and Shelby was able to organize and deliver this session on behalf of the industry associations. So thank you, Shelby, for doing that. And I'd just like to pass it over to Tyrion with BC Grape Growers Association for some words of welcome before we get started. Thanks, Tyrion.
Great, thanks, Kelly. I wanted to welcome Matt Treble and Wendy Bennett from AgSafe. Thank you so very much for doing this. Our audience isn't large, but I think the joy of online is, we can go straight to video so that people can access the information. We had a rally yesterday in Osoyoos, thanks to everybody who came out it became really clear, touch points for mental health that, where the stressors are for growers. And so, this is only just one way that I think we're going to try as industry associations to address the stress loads that growers are feeling. But, this is a long uphill battle. So we're definitely going to be posting this to our website so people can access it, and we'll have lots more events in the future. So thank you so much to Kelly and Shelby for putting this on. This is our cross-commodity work in action, where they, this is one of the topics that impacts all growers, and instead of doing our own little thing in our own silos, this way we can really talk to a broader audience across the commodities and use resources well, instead of bogging down our own small organizations with the same thing over and over again. We can really use Kelly and Shelby well to do these cross-commodity things. So that's enough of that. So I'll leave it to Matt and Wendy to actually talk about mental health.
All right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Matt, and I'm co-presenting today with the fantastic Wendy Bennett from AgSafe. We'll get into a little bit of intros, but just to start us off, we're here to talk about mental health and wellness. And the main topic of today is we're talking about how we can support ourselves, but also how we can support others, recognizing that this is a community effort as we're all facing tough times, and how can we bring that in to support each other. So I'll pass it over to Wendy for some quick intros.
Okay, really fast. I don't know if I can match Matt's energy level, but I'll do my best. Wendy Bennett, I'm the executive director of AgSafe, and 5 years ago we had a dream that we would be able to offer mental health support, and the world of health and safety that AgSafe has embodied for 30 years needed to include mental health as the key component of health. And so we've partnered with Canadian Mental Health Association, hence Matt Treble, who is way more amazing than me, who has a fantastic presentation. And it's so timely because I saw an article in the Okanagan News today about the rally yesterday, and recognized that growers in the region are experiencing a pretty challenging year. And there's a great need for information and support in this area. So I'm really happy for everybody that's here and everybody who sees this afterwards. So back to you, Matt.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wendy. So my name is Matt, and like Wendy mentioned, I work kind of for a few organizations. My home site is the Canadian Mental Health Association of BC, but this is a position that was created in partnership with AgSafe to support ag life, which I'll talk a bit more about in the next slide. But I have a background in mental health and wellness, and I'm very honored. I've been on the project for about 6 months now, and it has just been fantastic getting to develop curriculum like this and facilitate trainings for folks who are in agriculture and experiencing this firsthand because like Wendy mentioned, we want to bring these services out and we want to make sure they're accessible and actually reflective of what the needs are. So before diving in, I'll tell you a little bit about Ag Life. So what Ag Life is it at its core, it's a partnership between the Canadian Mental Health Association of BC and AgSafe BC. The goal of Ag Life is to be a mental health and wellness digital hub for all of BC agriculture. Now, what I mean by digital hub is if you go to the Ag Life website, which I will acknowledge is an ever-growing website, anytime we learn about new resources, they get added there. So what you see now might not be what you see a week from now as we continue to grow and expand. But the idea of a digital hub is we're bringing everything together in one space. One of the hardest parts of mental health and wellness resources is navigating what is out there and what is available. So by having all of us search for not only mental health and wellness resources, but mental health and wellness resources specifically for BC agriculture, we're putting them all together in one space to hopefully make it easier for folks that are doing the work to access these resources. Now, Ag Life also houses the Ag Life Connector program, which is a free suicide prevention and mental health awareness training for anyone in BC agriculture. So like I mentioned, we just officially launched, I believe, in April. So we are newer, but we're trying to make our splash in BC agriculture and really support people by bringing the training, the skills, and the resources to the community level. So today, we're here to talk about mental wellness and agriculture in BC and what that looks like. We're also going to talk a little bit about what does stress look like? How can we manage stress? What does that look like in the context of agriculture? And then we're going to wrap up the conversation talking a little bit about some easy to use practical skills that you can use to support other people you may come into contact with. So first, we're gonna really stretch my tech skills here, and I'm gonna ask, you have two options for this. I wanna ask you the question of what are some stress factors that may impact people working in agriculture? As well, you can do this via Slido. So there's a link there, slido.com, if you wanna open up a new tab or access from your smartphone, or you can pop some answers in the chat and we'll talk about them there before diving into some other ones.
And
So
Matt,
what do you think? Yeah.
sorry, you have a question.
Oh, sorry, I can't actually see the participants. I'm so sorry to have missed that.
That's why.
Whoever has the question.
Oh, Sukti, please go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm just on
Yes.
my laptop. This is awesome, and this is something that I'm the vice president of the BC Fruit Growers. So this is something me and Melissa really wanted to push because we're seeing it quite a bit here. My question is this is awesome, but 70% of our growers in the Okanagan are Indo-Canadian and Punjabi speaking. So is there translation services or is there facilitation for Punjabi speaking? And I wouldn't expect the uptake to be too much at start because it's something that our community never likes to talk about. It's like the bottom of the everything is mental health in our community. But I'm trying to push it to be more and more because I see it everywhere. We talk between ourselves, we talk at our gurdwaras, our temples, but we don't like to reach out to professionals. Is there resources for that? Or
when do we do?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm happy to tell you, so I do have two individuals on my team, one internal and one who's a safety advisor, who are first language is Punjabi. And then we also bring in a number of translators for health and safety services in the Okanagan. So we are 100% on board with bringing somebody to any, if Matt wanted to do a session and we could have a translator, takes a little longer, but it's quite valuable. I know TJ would be all over coming up and doing the presentation with Matt without the translation, him just doing a Punjabi presentation. He's well respected within the community. So yeah, and we can do anything that needs to be in written format. We have that capacity as well.
Yeah, and a lot of it is it's not always translation. It's I don't know how to
Understanding
put
the
it, but
culture.
it's like there's a stigma behind it. However, it's easier to talk to another Punjabi person, even if it's in English, than it is for one of my uncles to talk to Matt, is
Totally.
basically what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
Like, it's
Fully understand.
easier for them to talk to someone that understands their culture. And not saying like like, I don't want to be rude or anything, but
No.
like that's just like how things work. And the Okanagan is, if you go from, you know, grapes and tree fruits, it's 70%, I think even more than 70% now Indo-Canadians.
It is more than that.
Yeah,
And
and
it's, I know that TJ has, I mean, I can talk to you offline about this after, but we did have a story the other day where he arrived at a farm to do training in Punjabi, and the people had never had the opportunity to have somebody speak directly to them who was from the culture and who understood the differences in everything that you're explaining, which I don't understand, but that's because I'm not from the culture. So we do have that capacity, and I fully understand where you're coming from, and we would honor and respect that very much.
And if I can just add one more thing, in terms of the actual mental health resources, one of the people on the counseling team, which we'll talk about later, is Punjabi and offers the services in English and Punjabi. And while we're looking to expand that, that does mean that we have at least one person right now, hoping to bring on more, that hopefully hits that cultural connection piece that you're speaking to. Because you're totally right. It makes sense. And we want to make sure that we're addressing that need, especially with that representation in the fruit growers.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for bringing that question up. It's very important. So keeping us moving along, I want to just bring us back to this idea. Now, you all may be encountering stress in different ways, and I would love to start an open conversation with it. So if you have the technological capabilities to open up to a different tab or use your smartphone, go to slido.com, entering that code there, 2426906. Feel free, it's completely anonymous, to throw up some answers as to what's causing stress. If that's not working and you want to participate via the chat, that's totally fine too. And we'll leave this up, generating a few ideas, and then we'll talk a bit more about it on the next slide.
How many growers are in here? Is there many growers? Am I the only grower?
I'm a
No,
grower. Deepest
There's
Lynn.
Lynn,
Lynn's here, yeah.
probably four to six.
Do you mind if I just pop off on this question just via Zoom here quickly? I can tell you the biggest problem right now is the lack of crop and the financial stress. That's I mean, it's a no-brainer right now. Is throughout the valley, and I talk Okanagan only. There's no grapes, there's no cherries, there are no peaches, no prunes, no plums. There's very little apples, and if they are, they haven't made us money in the past. And interest rates rising, and over leveraging that happened, and in a couple of days here, our workers are going to get another bump up in raise for minimum wage for our temporary foreign workers, and that just adds more financial stress. Finances are probably, I would say, if you polled 100 growers, finances are number one. And then number two would be not having a crop. Number three would be, if I do have a crop, how do I pay for that crop? So it all comes back to finances.
Absolutely.
And it's not just this year. This is a cumulative thing. It's 4 or 5 years in a row now, ever since COVID. So 2020 to now has been just. I talked to my cousins, my uncles. Like before that, things were smooth. Like it wasn't always the best, it wasn't always the worst, but things were kind of smooth. March came in. I got back from India. And I got back 2 days before lockdown. Thank God I got back. My uncle got stuck in India for 6 months. And since then, it's just never been the same. After that, we had the heat dome, then another freeze, then a polar vortex. And then we had this last freeze we just had. And it's crazy to tell politicians that 36 hours can destroy the whole valley. And that's what it was. Basically, 36 hours of minus 30 degrees. And there you go. Now here we are. And I don't want to take up too much time. I can ramble forever, but
Well, it's all important what you're saying, so I really appreciate
I'll pass it on to somebody else now.
Well, I saw we had some folks typing, so if you were on the Slido popping in some answers, feel free to submit those. If not, I'll keep us moving unless if anyone has anything they want to unmute and share or pop in the chat. We'll do a going once. We'll do a going twice. Oh, I see one person typing. I'll wait an extra 10 seconds. Oh, and it's gone. Okay. I will move us along just to talk about it a little bit. So, oh, they were being sent in the whole time. There we go. So now you should see on the screen, we have feeling unheard. And even this type of question can stress people out. This idea of unknown of the future, crisis and conflict within the industry, being the minority in terms of culture, industry, a lack of respect, a lack of understanding from the greater culture or greater public, about agriculture and being treated like kindergarten kids. Finances, climate change, uncertainty in the industry, economic conditions, low returns and financial instability, and climate. So we're seeing a lot of unity in the responses you're giving, right? Like we're seeing big themes around financial strain, weather and climate change, and all of these things and how they really can bring in this stress, long-term climatic conditions. So let's talk about this a bit more here. So there are so many factors that can impact mental wellness in agriculture, but to touch on a few that you've already highlighted really well, we're talking weather and climate. This can create huge uncertainty to the viability of crops, as we're seeing right now. And great examples were brought up around the ideas of the heat dome and the deep freezes. Like they're great examples is the wrong terminology, but you know what I mean. It shows how these climate events can devastate crops, and then that drastically impacts the finances. We also have ideas around work-life balance. Working in agriculture is long days. And also for many folks, work is home, which can make it hard to have that work and life balance, which people say is so key to wellness. The intense physical labor can also leave people physically and mentally exhausted. Some folks experience a lot of stress around transition and succession planning. So planning for the succession of one's farm or crops, and that can cause increased stress if there isn't a clear-cut plan there. But what this almost always really ties into there is this idea of financial insecurity. Almost everything I just mentioned can directly impact finances in one way or another, and finances are what cause the most stress on average. Now, this is by no means an all-encompassing list. This is just a snapshot of the factors, which can sometimes bring up feelings of stress in and of itself, but it is really important to acknowledge that there are so many things that may be causing stress in this work. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what does stress actually look like, because for some folks, they may not even realize that their body is experiencing burnout or stress because it can look like so many different things. So in agriculture, stress can look like a lot of different things. This can be an increased heart rate. You may not even notice that your heart rate is going up. That can indicate extra stress. A big one that often goes unnoticed is aching muscles or tension in the muscles, specifically around the neck and shoulders. When I say unnoticed, what I mean is most of the time people can notice that their muscles are aching or there's tension, but they don't attribute it to stress. And this is actually a physical manifestation of the stress the body is going through. We also see things around increased or excessive fatigue, being extra tired. If you work in a situation that has animals or livestock or even just pets, a decline in care of animals can be an indicator of stress as well. An increase in farm accidents, as well as impacts on professional and personal relationships. So these are all different ways that stress can show up in daily work without people necessarily attributing it to stress. Now, again, this is not an all-encompassing list, but these are things that we can start to look out for, not only in ourselves, but also in our colleagues, in our friends, in our community members, as ways that we can try to support each other. If we notice these things are happening more and more, we might be able to help people connect with different resources and help them work with their mental health and wellness. So I want to talk quickly also about this idea of stress and control. Now, when we were talking about what are some of those stress factors, a lot of things around climate and finances and things came up there. Oftentimes, the things that we are experiencing feelings of stress about are out of our control. What I mean by that is when we're talking about the next deep freeze or the next climate event, we don't personally have any control if or when that is going to happen. That kind of ties into that idea of uncertainty that people are identifying in that open-ended response Slido. There's so much uncertainty that can cause feelings of stress because you never know when the next thing's going to happen. And in terms of productive stress, it can transition into unproductive or harmful pretty quick when we're always focusing on the things that are out of our control. It is natural to feel stressed about things that are out of our control because they impact us often the most. But leading researchers in stress control and agricultural research specifically kind of highlighted this strategy that when things feel stressful, if people can try and break it down into controllable and manageable parts, that sometimes can give you more sense of control in navigating the stress and also supporting your own wellness. So they showed that some great questions to ask are, what can you realistically change? Also, what is within your control versus what is outside of your control? How can we set up protection for ourselves for what we cannot control? And sometimes there are not clear-cut answers here. And that is tough to process and navigate. But if we start working through these questions around what is realistically in our control, we can start to manage our stress a little bit more by knowing that we are attempting to take control of what is causing us stress in the areas we can. So this idea of stress and control is really important to highlight because when our stress starts to really hyper focus on things that are out of our control, like for example, the next big climate event or one that could drastically impact crops, we can start to feel those impacts of stress that I was just talking about in other areas of our life that might impact, again, other areas of our life beyond our work. This can impact our personal relationships, our professional relationships, our wellness outside of work. So the more and more we can focus in on trying to deconstruct stressful ideas into what is in our control versus what is out, the more we can start to get a grasp on maybe some actionable things we can do. And people tend to respond better to actionable things that we can try and do. So with stress, again, mental wellness strategies are a key thing here. And these are little strategies, but they can also go a very long way. Now, you may read some of these and be like, yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that before. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel, but I do want to reiterate the importance of these where we can. So when you have the ability to take care of your body, for example, by eating well-balanced meals, that can help fuel you both mentally and physically for the workday, but also the stress that you may be unintentionally feeling as you navigate the day. As well, taking mini breaks where you can. Now, I know a big thing with working in agriculture is the amount of time that goes into the work. We don't often feel that we can take breaks. These don't need to be long, substantial breaks if that doesn't fit in the realism of your day. Instead, these can be mini stretch breaks for as short as even 1 to 5 minutes, just times to get in tune with your body, take some mini exercises, or things that give you a mental break for clarity. But perhaps the biggest one here that I really want to highlight is seeking help when needed. Now, agriculture is an industry where a lot of folks are independent just due to the nature of the work, and this can sometimes have an unintended consequence of people really taking on their battles by themselves and not wanting to open up or seek help. There is no shame in that, as that is also just a societal value we tend to do. But with what AgSafe's initiatives are doing and what AgLife is trying to do and why we're all here today, really reinforces this idea that allowing yourself to seek help when it's needed can be one of the most beneficial things you can do for your own mental wellness. And the type of help you seek can look like tons of different things. This doesn't mean you have to go speak to a counselor, although those resources are out there. Seeking help can also be talking to your spouse, talking to a close friend, connecting with cultural supports. It can be various ways to improve your own mental wellness. It does look different for everyone, but it's important to allow yourself to seek that help when needed and encourage others to allow themselves to seek the help, because that's how we're going to start to change the culture around mental wellness within the communities. So I've spent a lot of time talking about stress and mental wellness. Now I want to spend a bit of time talking about some hopefully easy to use skills that can allow us to check in with ourselves, but also the other people in our communities that we are supporting, but also just working with. So I've devised this into a mini two-step here that we can look into a bit more and just checking in on how we can support people. So the first idea here with checking in is, what can we look for? We already talked about some of the ways that stress can manifest in our bodies, in our work life, but let's talk about some more. So when people are experiencing high stress or mental distress, there are things that we can keep an eye out for. Oftentimes this boils down to changes. So if you're seeing changes in behavior, such as like an increased isolation, working even more, working excessively, that neglect of animals, maybe some increased insomnia or increases in physical pain, that is something we want to keep an eye out for here. What are ways that we can look for how stress might be manifesting itself in others? Similarly, changes in mood. When we are struggling with our mental wellness, often our mood can change quite drastically in a variety of ways. We might be way more irritable. We might come into anger a bit faster. Anxiety might be more prevalent, sadness, hopelessness, withdrawn. This can also expand to other emotions or feelings as well that are not listed here. But when we're seeing those changes in mood, that can sometimes be a pretty clear indicator that someone is struggling in some capacity. Now, again, changes in speech is a really important one too. You can start to get a sense of people's mood by how they talk. Now, there are some phrases that you can keep an eye out for, such as things like life isn't worth it, or there's way too much happening. I can't take all of this. People saying those things are generally trying to communicate some form of desire for help, whether or not they're acknowledging that themselves. When someone says like, I can't take all of this, it could totally be a cry for help. It also can sometimes just be a realistic statement based on the workload they are facing. And that's where that tricky balance is, right? As humans, we tend to avoid situations of discomfort, and talking about our feelings and our own mental wellness can sometimes be uncomfortable conversations. So we tend to just lean into the hope that maybe they're just making a comment on their workload or whatever that comparable situation could be. What I'm trying to implore and hope is that we'll start to listen for those changes in speech. And even if we're wrong, just check in. I would rather be wrong checking in when someone says something like that or has big changes in behavior and changes in mood and know that maybe they're just having an off day, than maybe miss signs that someone is experiencing a lot of stress and even potentially burnout. We want to try and keep an eye out for those things there. So that is part one of checking in. So what can we look for? Now let's talk a little bit more around what can we say. Now, one way to check in on someone is to let them know what we've noticed. And this can get a little tricky at times. So as an example, I've noticed that you've been working longer hours and aren't seeming like yourself. What's been going on for you lately? It's a pretty open, innocent question, but it just expresses that human care of, hey, I've been noticing some things and I just want to check in on you. Now, I do like to highlight, because I know sometimes when I talk about things like this, people get a little anxious about saying the wrong thing or being worried about what that might look like. You don't need to worry, because we're not trying to be mental health professionals and we're not trying to assess their mental health. Instead, we're just expressing care after noticing things that could be of concern. This community care is what is already existing in agriculture. I know so many people are already doing this, but this is just a reinforcement of the importance of it. How can we check in on each other to continue supporting each other? When you look at the past 5 years, there have been so many difficult things that the agricultural communities have had to have faced, let alone fruit growers like everyone here. When we think about that, we can really zero in on how resilient and strong the community is. And as resilient and strong as we are, we want to continue to be on top of it and continue supporting people in those ways. So these are just things that we can say. This isn't what you have to say. You might have your own style, but I like to provide this as a quick little tool or resource that sometimes one of the best ways to check in is just identifying what you have noticed as the changes and using that as a bit of an invitation to go, what's been going on for you lately? Like, do you want to chat about it? Are there ways that we can support you? I know having these mental health conversations can also be uncomfortable, but this is where we really want to tie it in and start to bring in those conversations if we can, to start to deconstruct that stigma and make people more comfortable talking about it. So With that, this ties into the step 2. So we've talked about things that we can look for, things that we can say. Now I would love to invite Wendy back so we can talk a little bit about some of the supports. We're going to kind of tag team this part a bit here because Wendy has been such a champion for mental wellness within agriculture. But once we know that, maybe someone is struggling or could benefit from seeking a support, we don't need to be the ones to connect them to the support or almost like force their hand. We can just make them aware of what is out there. One big barrier, as I identified earlier, is that sometimes people just don't know what resources are available and aren't aware of what is even out there or how easy it can be to access them. So I'd love to hand it over to Wendy to maybe talk about whatever ones of these you would like to.
Can I just quickly pop in with another question here? Sorry. Another thing that's been brought up to me and with talking with people is it's not just the actual farmer that's feeling it, it's their families that feel it a lot too. So the wives, the kids, the parents, the grandparents. I know there's lots of support. Would that support also be able to go to like example, like my dad or my wife or my mom or someone like that? Like, would they be able to reach out for these supports as well through ag, since I'm in ag? And I mean, they're not fully into it, but they feel the stress that I feel every day.
So short answer, yes. And I will explain more, but so I'm going to jump right to the bottom one first then, because
Perfect.
the question came up, is through the Ag Life, which is the hub of as many wellness programs as we can. The Mental Wellness Initiative includes counseling services at no cost to anybody involved in BC agriculture. So that is farm workers, farm families, farmers themselves. It can be anybody who identifies to a counselor that they are involved in BC agriculture is eligible for no-cost counseling. The initial offering is 8 sessions at an hour apiece, but we do have the ability for counselors to professionally determine if an individual would benefit from more. Many people just need 1 or 2. Some need 20, and that's okay. So we have counselors available throughout the province. I actually have 3 counselors who are bilingual Punjabi. I have 4 who speak Spanish. And if you have temporary foreign workers from Mexico, we actually have we have a team of therapists in Mexico City who are offering the counseling services. And we've just launched that same service with counselors in Guatemala for individuals who are from Guatemala. So yes, Deep, we have counselors that can offer services to you, your mom, your dad, your children. We have one who specializes in kids. She's based out of Salmon Arm. And a lot of them most of them are familiar with agriculture. Those who aren't familiar with agriculture learn really, really quickly. And the cultural piece was more important than the agriculture piece. So you can teach a lot of people about ag. We did explain very clearly that you don't suggest to a farmer that they go out and take a deep breath and go for a walk as part of self-care, because that's, I think most of you would probably walk out the door at that point. With this, moving upwards on the slide that Matt has, we have Ag Life Connector training, which Matt delivers. That's a suicide prevention and mental health awareness program designed for individuals who interact on a regular basis with farmers. It might be people involved in agriculture directly, but it can also be the periphery. So it can be the person who brings the supplies to the farm on a regular basis, who have the opportunity to notice changes in a farmer's situation and has the resources then from the training to be able to ask the questions that sometimes you might be afraid what the answer might be, because then what do you do? So this provides the information to have a brief conversation and offer the resources and the support, including information about the counseling services that are available. Then within aglife.ca, we're continually, as Matt indicated earlier, talking about how to connect with the training, where to find the counseling. Lots of other different types of short recordings articles and things like that. It's growing on a daily basis. So we're doing our best to provide a lot of agriculturally oriented and very specific resources and supports. The biggest one that I'm most excited about is this counseling. We just did get another influx of cash to make sure that it continues. I pleaded with the Premier and the Minister of Agriculture, and they both agreed to me. So I'm choosing to believe that if we don't take care of our farmers, then the rest really doesn't matter. So back to you, Matt.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Wendy.
We saw that yesterday too, Wendy, when we talked to the Premier and Minister and all the MLAs and people that were around. They saw the pain on people's faces. They saw the pain on farmers. So I think if they're offering you something, they're going to give it to you now for sure after being out there.
So I should make another appointment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. So we wanted to highlight this slide specifically because these are resources that AgSafe and AgLife have put together specifically for agriculture. Now, the resources I'm about to show you on the next slide are not necessarily specifically for agriculture, but I do just like to highlight them because sometimes they may be, I know some folks that have attended my connector trainings who have said these next ones, even though they're not specifically for agriculture, sometimes they're desirable because they're pretty quick. Like you can almost talk to someone within an hour if you reach out to them, but if not way less, sometimes within minutes. So I do just want to highlight them as little back pocket ideas for you just in case. So first off, I want to demystify the word crisis lines. When you hear crisis lines, you think crisis, like I need to reach out only in a crisis. It's misleading, and unfortunately it is in the title, but crisis line is there for even if you're just having a bad day. So I just want to highlight 988 as it is a national offering, that you can call or text. It's meant to mimic 911, but for mental health services. So right now they're only offering the supports in English or French, but it is 24/7 for emotional support, crisis support, and it is just something that you can keep in a back pocket. The reason I like to highlight it is because it has that text option, which I know for some people having time to sit down and talk to someone can be really, really challenging. And even if text isn't ideal, sometimes just having that freedom to send a text, wait a few minutes, respond when you have the next availability can be super helpful. Now, there are plenty of crisis lines, but I did want to quickly highlight the KUAS crisis line. This is operated by Indigenous people for Indigenous people throughout the province of BC who are facing any difficult situations and would like someone to talk to. They provide non-judgmental support and work to help people navigate what they're going through. So they operate very similarly to 911, but with that cultural lens for Indigenous people. I could have made probably like 3 or 4 slides of just what crisis services are out there, but I wanted to just highlight 2 and encourage you to look on aglife.ca, as we have a list of many more that you can reach out to as well. So those are some non-agriculture specific supports that I just like to bring attention to. Now, transitioning into the final few minutes here of our presentation, we wanted to end on a quick note of self-care. Recognizing though that self-care is capacity-based and it's not always realistic. So take this with a grain of salt, but I can't do a mental health presentation without talking a little bit about self-care, because there is that saying that if your cup isn't full, how can we help everyone else? And as we navigate stuff like this, we want to support ourselves as well. You all are just as important as the people that we want to support. So self-care is vital for not only who you're supporting, but also for you. Some questions that you can ask yourself when you're trying to develop some strategies of self-care are, what are some activities or things that can help you recharge? What do you realistically have capacity for? And this question is so important, not just for agriculture, but just for us as humans. When I say self-care, I know personally, like I have this immediate, like almost like trigger of a thought where I'm like, I don't have time for a bath with like a bath bomb and all these nice candles and everything. As lovely as that sounds, I don't have time for that. Self-care sometimes is doing the things that actually don't feel like self-care, but are going to set you up for success down the road. That might be meal prepping a meal so that tomorrow you have a healthy lunch to eat. Even though that might feel like a chore in the moment, it's a way to provide care for yourself in the future. It might be going grocery shopping so you have food there when you need it. Self-care looks like so many different things. And that's what I really, really wanted to highlight here. Is when we are telling you to prioritize self-care, we're not trying to insinuate that you need to find those key moments of relaxation. If you can, awesome. I love that. But if you can't, just don't bully yourself into thinking self-care has to look a certain way. You can engage in self-care in a variety of different ways that fit your realistic capacity based off your workload and your life. Some ideas and suggestions, I talked about these again, but I do just want to highlight them. Eating well-balanced meals that can fuel your body, prioritizing rest at the end of the workday, whatever that looks like for you and if it's reasonable. Taking regular stress or movement breaks as short as 1 to 3 minutes. It can be however fits in with your day. But the most important one here is allowing yourself to seek help if you need it. Again, I talked about this like a little while ago in the presentation, but what that help looks like can be different from person to person. It doesn't have to be reaching out to a counselor or a crisis line or anything like that. If it is, awesome. That's what those supports are there for. But it can also be reaching out to a friend or a trusted loved one, a family member, cultural supports. It can be whoever. But the key thing there is allowing yourself to seek help. It's one of the hardest things we can do is allow ourselves to put time into prioritizing our mental wellness. But we're trying to deconstruct that narrative and help people feel empowered to reach out so that we can continue supporting ourselves and others. Which I think we're right on time, brings me to the end of our presentation here. And I'd love to open the floor if there's any questions or comments to myself, Wendy, anyone. We're here to answer them as best we can.
Thank you very much, Matt. If you stop sharing your screen, we'll be able to see the video
Yeah.
a bit better.
If I can figure out, there we go. Technology, not my top.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you stepping in throughout the presentation, Deep, and giving us the perspectives that you've been hearing and that you're experiencing yourself. And I'd really love to hear from others on the call if they'd like to share or ask questions.
Well, I feel like my job is to facilitate this. So I quite clearly heard Deep's comments about the cultural needs. And so, the possibility of actually doing something through the temples would be great. I think we can make that happen. So I'll follow up with Matt and Wendy. I have a really technical question for Wendy. And the complications of the wine grape industry is you're ag safe and speak to farmers, but we have wineries that aren't under your umbrella. So can we actually be sending winery staff that might be wine shop or administrative to any of these resources? I guess so, hey?
So I anticipated this question. And I actually have met with the ministry, and it's going up to executive to clarify some things. But what I would like to recommend is that the training programs and the resources online would be available to all. So the AgLife Connector training, 100% people within the wineries, because they are connecting with the people in the field who are primary agriculture. So the individuals who are working in the vineyards, regardless of their employer, are primary agriculture, and I would extend the counseling opportunities to them as well. Right now, I'm working with the funder to determine how much further beyond can it go into the wine shop, because I don't want to run out of money. So sticking with the primary agriculture at this point is where we're at, but that does include the vineyards that are part of a winery. The training goes with anybody who's going to interact with workers in agriculture, or sorry, with people in agriculture.
Okay.
Does that make sense for now?
Yeah, for now. It's always evolving and changing. It's so complicated, but I think that's good. Yeah.
Ministry of Agriculture and Food also includes seafood and processing, and like the list is quite endless, and our funding is quite finite. And so I need to ensure that it's getting to the people who truly need it, which could be individuals within a winery itself as well. I understand that. But until I have clarity from them, we're sticking with primary agriculture.
Great. Excellent. That answers my question. And I'll keep in touch to find out the answers that you get. And so then I have a bit of a personal question, more for Matt. So if if you're feeling, oh my God, life is overwhelming and I just can't take it all, and I'm just, at that burnout stage, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just want somebody to help me. Meal prepping is not something at the top of my list.
Mhm.
I don't have time to do it all. Where the
Yeah.
hell am I going to find time to do this?
Mhm.
So to get over that, I mean, I certainly get the topic of, this is good for your long-term health, but how do I actually manage it in the moment? What
Mhm.
suggestions do you have to sort of help get over that hump, or,
Yeah.
actually find the time and energy to do those things that you're suggesting as self-care?
Mhm.
But to
I
me,
think
it's
that's
just
a
one more frippin' thing on the endless list of things to do, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I always love to highlight like self-care, what you have capacity for, right? And I would almost argue the answer to your question is also a form of self-care, like finding those strategies to work through those feelings of overwhelm. In terms of like concrete in the moment strategies, really taking those breaks, there are plenty of like mindfulness breathing exercises you can do. However, sometimes that requires a bit of buy-in and people aren't feeling super like may not feel like it's for them. Coming over those feelings of overwhelm, especially when we're talking about burnout and things like that, one of the most effective strategies is talking to someone. And a lot of research indicates that like it doesn't need to be a mental health professional. Like if you have access to that, which we do, thankfully through the mental wellness initiative, that's awesome. But even just like opening up about the feelings, a lot of times like just venting and getting it off your chest can provide that more in the moment relief that people are looking for, where that is something we don't often allow ourselves to do just due to how we view talking about mental health, and also around ideas of how we should be managing it ourselves and how some people think they're weak for talking about it. So I know it might seem like kind of like a pretty like straightforward answer of just talking about it, but that is truly one of the most effective things you can do. Who you choose to talk about it and connect with is up to you, but having those connection points, whether it's a spouse, a loved one, a friend, a family member, a counselor, a crisis line, whoever it is, it can sometimes just get it off your chest, provide you with that bit of in the moment clarity to then refocus on whatever task you're trying to focus on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's a good question.
I would love to talk about other ways that we can reach out to meet the needs of the communities that you're referring to, because I I know so many people feel isolated and they think that they're in all of this on their own, and to know that there's a community of support behind them. And you're right, that's not on a PDF or a website or anything like that. And you're always welcome to come and have the Honey Nut Cheerios in my cupboard that my children had for dinner more than once. Um, so it is a real thing. But I would really love if we could connect later. Perhaps we can work through Shelby to see what else we can do to offer support in those areas.
And Deep, you've got your hand up. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I totally echo Lynn's comments here. She put it better than I could have ever. Yeah, no one's going to reach out to PDFs and Zoom videos. But I think we also need to be a little bit positive too. Like, it's going to take time. My generation is a little bit different than my dad's generation. I could try and convince my dad 20 hours a day to go to counseling and he'll never go, even though he probably does. He went through a lot when he came to Canada, racism, all of that. He went through everything in the 70s, 80s. But he just holds it in. He's tough. Our generation, if we can save our generation, that'd be, I think, the starting point right now, is because I see it even in guys my age, 35 to 40 years old. They're into a lot of things. Alcoholism is a massive problem in our community, like massive problem. And I think counseling can help with that. I'm not sure if it can, but I hope that it can help some people. Wendy, you might have better idea of if some of the counselors are like into substance abuse and all of that, because that's also a massive issue Like the finances take you into that. When you're not making money, you numb yourself with booze and drugs. So, and we see it daily. Like there's 2 guys in town here that don't even leave their house, not looking after their farm anymore, because they're just drinking 9 to 9 every day, 12 hours a day, and then they just sleep and wake up and drink again. So it's good that we're touching on this. And I really appreciate this initiative. This is awesome. This is something that we've needed for a long time. We're behind the ball now, but we're going to catch up.
And I really appreciate having leaders like you to help us to do that and to push it forward and to make it happen.
Just a quick comment, because I'm not a farmer, but I work in the agriculture space. Yeah. The significance of you being here and bringing the voice of the Indo-Canadian community can't be talked about enough.
Agree.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
One of the things that came really clear to me yesterday, that I don't think I had really thought about deeply before was, there, as in the presentations, we talk about lots of things that we don't have control over, but there are lots of things we do have control over. And so this idea of, offering support, financial, I'm thinking, government programs and all the paperwork that growers have to do, and that cause of stress that you farm all day and you do book work all night, and that's not your forte. And I feel like we need, as an industry, to be addressing the causes of some of the stress rather than just offering supports. And maybe that, listening to Deep talk too, that, maybe that is really where we need to be focusing the efforts. That if culturally people, and, it's not just the Indo-Canadian community, I think farmers in general are hard workers and they muscle through, and so counseling isn't necessarily where they're going to go. And so we need to actually be addressing the problem at the root and finding alleviation there.
Anybody else want to share anything or ask any more questions before we wrap up today? It's been a great session. I think it's not many people here, but that's okay, because I think we've still had an excellent discussion and it's been recorded, and hopefully we can share it more broadly if that's appropriate and make our way that way. Okay, thank you, everybody. And stay well, and let's just keep talking about it and figuring out how we can support each other moving forward. Really appreciate you being here today. See you later.